You need more gravy? This Thanksgiving, you're gonna wanna make chicken fried turkey. We've done turkey in every way. Nick's deep frying and basting turkeys. We've got roast turkey, sous vide turkey, but everybody's agreed once we did this, this is the best turkey we've ever done. And it's like 30 minutes worth of work. Here's our spin on a Thanksgiving turkey dinner. We are getting into the tenderizing on step one. We're gonna do this all the way through with one turkey breast. If you're gonna do multiple, just follow the same process over and over. We have a breast that is about 1.5 pounds. This is gonna be enough to serve 2 to 3 people. So we're gonna go through and show you how to make this chicken fried turkey fried. The most important part that we're doing here is trying to tenderize and make this one even thickness. We have a turkey breast here that has a tender on it. So we're gonna take our knife, give a little slice, spread it out, but all connected, it's not coming off. This other part here, this is the thin part. This is the thickness that we're aiming for everything. So this is the part we're not really gonna pound too much. We will beat it up a little bit to tenderize it, but not thin it out. This other thick side here, we're gonna take and do an even slice that's about the same thickness here. We're gonna have some room to spread it out. Does not wanna go all the way through because we wanna keep this one continuous piece. Kind of slide through with the tip. This is just gonna help our pounding later so we don't have to just beat this down and try to break it apart. We're giving ourselves a little head start. The other thing, on this side of the turkey, we don't have a lot of this sinew connective tissue. It's pretty nice and spread out, just the meat. On the top side, where we remove the skin, there's a full layer of silver skin here. If we don't do a pre-treatment to this, if we don't score it, when we fry this, this wants to shrink up, tuck up like this, and we'll have this like wet, unfried, soggy part in the middle. So we're gonna take the tip of our knife and just do a little slice through, kind of like you were scoring a duck breast or something else. Doesn't really need to go into this because that's not really the silver skin. And it doesn't have to be really fine. We're just doing it so that when this does shrink up, it's shrinking up in little batches instead of it being the whole thing and making a soggy part in there. Now, to keep it from splattering all over, I like to use a Ziploc bag. Zipper top is cut off. We're gonna spread this out, and that's gonna keep us from, like, if there's any liquid or juices on here, splattering turkey all around your kitchen. You don't wanna like go from the edges and just randomly do it. You kind of go in this method where you're working out from the center and spreading out the thick pieces, as well as like breaking apart the strands of protein, and that's tenderizing it. It's not like a hammer. We don't want to break it apart. We want to keep this one nice big piece. So we're going to gently kind of go from the center. When you're doing this, you can feel where there's more resistance and the meat and the protein is tighter. That's where you're going to give a little bit more focus on, just how it starts feeling like it's softer. That's going to mean later when we fry it that this tough cut is tenderized. It's gonna get it started on one side, and I'm using like a flatter side of the mallet. There's a deeper one that will like put holes in it. We'll do that towards the end, but right now we're just gonna kind of smooth it around. Not a whole lot here different. It did spread it out a touch. You know, this is me going slow through it too. This should only take you a quick 5 minutes. Again, I'm pounding out the parts that were thicker, trying to still get it at this same thickness. I'm noticing it's still a little bit thick. Going around the tenders, that outside. That's it. I think it's pounded out enough. We've got our thinnest part here is right about the same thickness as every other part. It's all consistent. So when this cooks, this part's gonna finish at the same time as this part. It should be nice and juicy and soft. If you remember with our Science of Fried Chicken, we did all sorts of trials trying to dial in the perfect breading for fried chicken. And we're taking one of those and adapting it for this. We're actually using the breading that we developed for the Ultimate Sous Vide Thanksgiving KFC turkey. We are using all-purpose flour, cornstarch, baking soda, it's our leavener, kosher salts, also helps the baking soda react, and our KFC-style spice blend. Sure, that can be optional, but you really should just make it and have a big batch of it because it's the best seasoning there is. So mix it up and we're all ready to bread. It's a pretty big batch here. It's better to have a little bit left over than it is to not have enough, especially when you're in the middle of breading this. With an egg wash, we're not just wanting to do like eggs and whisk them up. We want to thin it out just slightly with water, so that helps us spread out the eggs a little bit, so it thins them out a touch, so it doesn't really overly coat. So we're gonna add some water, we're gonna whisk it up, and we're gonna strain it. Straining is an important step because we don't want the big gobs of egg that are gonna be inconsistent when we do the breading. They'll leave like big chunky unhydrated spots. We've got our 6 eggs, 50 milliliters of water. Again, that's just helping us thin it out. And at this point, it's really just a whisk and mix. You can see we got a little bits of chunks in there. You can do this with a whisk until you see those chunks go away, but that's what the strainer is gonna do to help get those out. Give it a little mix, and all the chunky bits are gonna be nice and smooth by the time they go through. And what doesn't make it through, we don't use. We got everything that we wanted to. We see that there's still some globules and stuff in here. We can just kind of work that out. If you'd use a blender or a stick blender, you'll break that up a little bit more, but right now we've got enough in there. We're gonna get into setting up our breading station. Now we have our breading station set up. Got my turkey here with a roasting pan in it. This is gonna be used for the steps in between breading so that it can rest and hydrate. We're gonna go flour, let it sit for 5 minutes. What that's gonna do is let the little bit of flour, we're gonna shake it off and it's gonna hydrate and stick to the turkey. Now that's an important step. When we do that, what we're doing is making sure that the breading is gonna bond tightly to the turkey. You're not gonna have a cut or a bite where the breading completely slides off and then you just have a piece of turkey with a piece of breading. All gonna stay together, so really important to do that. So we're gonna go flour, let it rest. We're gonna go into egg, let it rest. Again, that's hydrating the flour, and then we're gonna go back in to our flour for the final dredge. Now, what we learned in our research is that if we took a little bit of the buttermilk and got the flour a little bit chunky and dirty first, that helped build the little bits of like cornflake crunch on there. We just wanna get fingers in there, fingers in here, rub it around a bit. We can't overdo it. We're really only gonna be doing 1 or 2 rounds in this. So it's these little bits that you're getting here that's just like that dough. That's what's gonna create those like layers of cornflakey crunch on there on the very first piece that we do. So we don't have that funky pancake that you throw away the first time. We are gonna take our turkey, we're gonna get it into the flour. If you're doing multiple of these, that's what our resting pan is for. We can put it over here and just let it sit. The biggest deal is we want to make sure every one of these little bits and nooks, crannies has got some flour in there. We don't have just little raw bits exposed, because if we do that, the egg wash isn't going to hydrate, and then we're not going to have any adoration adhering for the second breading, and you're going to have little pockets that are not fully breaded. So at this point, we're going to let it sit here. As you can see, it's very dry. There's some loose flour on there. We're just going to let it sit 5 minutes. Moisture, it's going to come out of the turkey. It's going to start hydrating and get to a little bit of a tackiness on here. So 5 minutes later, we're going to get back into the next step. Through all of our trials, this key important step is really what makes the breading actually bind to whatever it is you're frying. In this case, we're doing turkey. And on here, you can really see that there's some light wet spots. The moisture is starting to hydrate the flour. It's tacky, it's not just falling off. So now, next step, throw it in here and let the eggs really soak up all of that flour. Remember, I put a little bit extra in here, so if it's not fully covering it, put it in there, give it a flip. Just make sure that every little bit is soaking. So the big thing that we're looking for at the end of this process is that we don't have any little pockets or bubbles that burst and roll out and have dry flour. If it's just dry flour on there, that's just a spot where all that flour is gonna go away and you're gonna have a spot that doesn't have any fried breading. So at this point, just let it sit, 5 more minutes, we'll get into our next step. At this point, our turkey's been in the egg wash for about 5 minutes. Now, like I said earlier, if you're doing multiple batches of it and you need this out, dipping it in here, getting it fully hydrated, and like having it sit on a roasting rack or in another pan while you're doing the next stage is fine, as long as it sits, hydrates, and fully soaks up all the flour. Now, the big key thing that we want to look at here is when I pick this up, that I don't have any popping bits of the egg wash so that nothing like pops and then shows dry flour underneath. Because if we do that, again, we're gonna have a spot on there that does not have any bread. So we've got it. It looks like everything is nice and hydrated. We're gonna move right into our final dredging spot. We don't want too much of the egg wash to actually drip off. We want a little bit of a heavier egg wash. What that's gonna do is give us those extra crunchy layered bits. If you were just doing this and going right into the flour and then over, it doesn't hydrate enough. You don't get all of the craggly bits. That's what's gonna end up giving you all that texture. So you wanna make sure those stay there, don't overwork it, don't take any of those off. Another little trick, besides us doing the little craggly bits that were in there, we also can take a little bit more of the egg while it's sitting here and give it that little droplets. That's gonna sit there and hydrate. Then we're just gonna cover it with more flour. We're gonna be patient, let it sit here. We'll move on to the next step when we set up our fryer. So we are starting off making a roux, nice butter, turning it up, and we're gonna put about half of our pepper in there. We want a little bit of toast, but we wanna have like a nice fresh pepper flavor at the end as well. Crank this up. We wanna make sure that the butter gets foamy, but we don't wanna start doing a brown butter here. We'll get a little bit of that nutty brown butter flavor once we add the flour and start toasting that. Start with a little bit of soft butter if you have the ability to. This step will go a lot faster. It's nice and melted. At this point, we can add our flour in. Once we add our flour, we're looking for a little bit of foamy toast. We want to start smelling brown butter, nuttiness. We want the flour to start toasting. Get rid of all of our clumps of flour, all of the butters melted, and really toast our black pepper. What we don't want to do is start getting any color. We're still keeping this as a blonde roux. Black pepper gravy is a white gravy with black pepper in it, so we don't want it to be a dark gravy. We're not using any stock, it's a milk base. So at this point, cook the flour for about a minute. It's plenty of time. We're going to turn this off. Take this off the heat. Let it cool down slightly. If we add our milk right into it, we're gonna immediately hydrate, seize up, and we could possibly get some clumps. So it's better to let this cool down a little bit. Nice cold milk. It's gonna bring the temperature of everything down so it's fluid. The flour is gonna be suspended in there, and then we'll slowly bring it up and let it hydrate so that it's nice and smooth without any big chunks. So get it all in there right away. That really cools the pan down, and we're not worrying about anything hydrating right away. We'll disperse all that flour. We're gonna add in our salt, our seasoning. We're gonna add in our garlic powder, just makes it taste delicious. Pepper, we're gonna wait till the very end. I don't want that to just seep out into it and just kind of muddy it all up. It's gonna be finished with that. So now that I have that all dispersed evenly, we're gonna turn it back up. We're just gonna sit here and stir until it comes up to a simmer, to a boil. That's gonna hydrate the flour. We'll cook it out on a low simmer for a little bit. It's gonna take probably 5 minutes for this to come up and get nice and hot. So the gravy's been cooking for about 3-4 minutes. I can start feeling a little bit of that flour hydrating and wanting to stick on the bottom. So really important to keep it moving. We're almost up to a simmer. We wanna cook this for about a minute at a full boil. Don't let it boil over, but you want it bubbling. That's gonna cook out that raw flavor of the flour. This gravy is going to look a little thin, but with a chicken fried steak, this is gonna be going into a carafe. It's gonna be going table side. You're gonna be pouring it. What you don't want is just like goopy, chunky, thick gravy. So it's gonna be a little bit thinner here. Don't worry, don't add more roux to it. It's gonna be perfect when we serve it. We've got some steam coming off. We're almost to that simmer point. I can visibly see it thickening up a touch. It's got a little bit of a sheen, more viscosity. We really want to get it all the way up to that simmer though. We're almost there. There we go. So you can see, got a bit of a boil, simmer. We still want to make sure we're moving this. It needs to boil, cook for about a minute to make sure that that flour doesn't taste raw, but we don't want any scorching. We don't want any burning because that'll just ruin the flavor of all of it. To me, it looks perfect. It's going to cool down. Flour is going to gelatinize a little bit. It's going to get thick. We're going to lose some of this moisture as we reduce it. At this point, I'm looking like I'm at the right consistency. So I'm going to turn my heat off, Add that last bit of pepper. Whisk it in. Now we have that pepper country fried gravy. Okay, we're ready to chicken fry this turkey. So we'll go quick over our frying station. We want this to be a smooth process, so we've got this set up so we're ready from start to finish. Turkey's gonna go into our oil. Once it's done with the oil, we're going onto a roasting rack and we're gonna season it with our KFC spice blend. Now, little trick that we do here, and you can check this resource out on our Science of Fried Chicken. So we have some oil from our trials that we were doing that's preconditioned. It's been fried in. Just with fresh oil in a fryer, the first one doesn't turn out that great until it gets broke down a little bit, and you'll be able to see all of that science in the video we have. So we're gonna add about 1/3 of the volume into our fresh oil of the oil we've already fried with. Now we are ready to fry this big piece. I have this set up, so the first side that's gonna go down is going to be the scored breast size. That's on the bottom. Carefully, we're gonna lift this up. We don't really wanna lose a lot of the flour and everything that's on here. I've shaken off what I wanted to come off. So carefully, starting on one side, getting this down into the frying oil, step back. Let us do his thing. We don't want to touch this. Just leave it there. Give it a couple little shifts. We don't want it to stick to the bottom. Since this is a shallow fry and it's not fully floating in there, the bottom side of this is actually pressing down on the pan. Our probe is reading the oil. It's wanting to heat it up. So we're gonna have a lot more temperature coming through the bottom. And if we don't move this around and flip it, the bottom's gonna color where it's touching the pan. You're starting to get these little cornflake bits. We made those little crispy bits on there so that the first one turns out craggly and beautiful on the first go. This isn't a super long cook. We're aiming to get to about 150 degrees internally. The big thick piece of turkey like this, we do not want to overcook it and make it dry. So we're gonna pull it at about 150 degrees. It's gonna go and carry over and be right where we want it and still be really moist. I feel like the bottom is set up enough that I'm ready to kind of flip it over. We're gonna flip it more than once. It's not just one time and we're done. We don't want this to splash and burn anything. So we're gonna use a little spatula, a little extra hand. If you've got 2 sets of tongs, you can do that. But what we're gonna do is carefully flip it. You can see it started to get color just where it was touching. So we're gonna wanna kind of flip this, keep it moving. And that's really coming from the initial shock of this big piece of meat going into oil that we've got maintained at one temperature. You can see it's dropped it down to about 270 degrees in the oil. So the fryer is pumping heat into the bottom. And that's what really kind of toasted that a little bit, started getting color on it. It's not a bad thing as long as it doesn't burn. We're really gonna aim for that consistency almost around the whole thing. Make sure your probe when you're reading it is not touching the bottom because that'll give you an inaccurate read. We're gonna check the temperature after about 6 minutes of frying. Might need to go a little bit longer, might need to go a little bit less, depends on how big the breast is. All right, well, I'm seeing a little bit of moisture coming out here, a little bit of protein coagulation, so I'm gonna flip this again. But we did a pretty good job of making sure this was even all the way through. We're up above 150 degrees in all parts that I want it to be in, so I'm gonna remove this out carefully, making sure that we're slowly kind of tipping the grease off. Let the little bit extra fat drip. Presentation side's gonna stay up here. You can feel it's nice and crispy. You can see it's kind of popcorny, craggly on top. At this point, I want to give it a good season. At this point, our chicken fried turkey is done. It's resting. You don't really want to eat this immediately. If you crack right into it, it's going to get really steamy. It's going to sog a little bit. So we want it, just like any meat, to rest and come down, cool off a touch before we serve it. Very important to have this on a rack that's elevated. If it's sitting on itself just on a plate that you're serving, the bottom is going to steam. It's going to get a little bit soggy and soft. But right now we have this amazing crunchy, crispy bits. We're gonna let it cool and temper while we set up everything else for our family. Crispy fried turkey. Nick back there has been telling me that this is better than any of the other turkeys we've had, so I'm gonna have him try it first. Nick, are you ready? Coming in hot. He wants turkey.
I want to try the turkey.
So,
It's a bold statement.
well, you said it was the best turkey you've had, so you made the bold
I
statement.
didn't.
I'm gonna cut it into smaller pieces so you don't have to take the whole strip.
Thank
all right?
you.
This is family style.
Can we get gravy too?
Oh, gravy. Get that gravy on there.
All right.
Get that gravy, baby.
So this is the easiest and
Easiest.
the best. That's the claim.
And juicy. 30 minutes. How's it?
Tender, very tender for turkey. It's crispy. And how long did this take to make?
30 minutes.
30 minutes. Take you 30 minutes longer to go to the store and buy one.
You need more gravy or is that good?
Pour
Okay.
it, pour it.
It's all about the service.
Thank you.
Great. Good.
Great job.
Okay. Thank you. There you have it. Chicken fried turkey. Great for Friendsgiving. Great for Thanksgiving. Great for every week. Go to chefsteps.com and you can get all the recipes for this.